Welcome to Lesson 3.7, talking about the judicial branch today. Our objective for Lesson 3.7, I can explain the role of the judicial branch in American government. Okay, in our lesson question, what does the judicial branch do? And a couple of key terms that you'll hear throughout this lesson. One is justice, which has a couple meanings. Okay, one is if you're seeking justice, okay, that means you're seeking fairness. Okay, so one meaning is of justice is fairness. Another meaning of that word justice is one of the 9 people who are judges on the Supreme Court. Okay, so justice can also refer to an individual. It can be a noun as well. And then federal means the national government, okay, the government of the entire country, the whole United States, as opposed to individual states, which we'll talk about in our next lesson on federalism. Okay, what is the judicial branch of government? First of all, the judicial branch of government is set up in Article 3 of the Constitution. Okay, so we're talking about Article 3, and the judicial branch is basically the court system. Okay, so the courts of the United States, also called the federal courts. Okay, I'm going to put that in parentheses because that's something, if you ever listen to the news or you hear people talk about the court system, they'll distinguish between federal courts versus state courts. Now, there are a bunch of different courts in the United States. At the top is the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay, the U.S. Supreme Court, the justices of the U.S. Supreme Court, not Supremes, okay, the U.S. Supreme Court. There are 9 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay, they're here. You won't have to know who they are, but here, this guy right here is Neil Gorsuch. Justice Gorsuch is from Colorado. He's one of the newest justices on the bench. Also, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Justice Ginsburg recently passed away and has since been replaced on the U.S. Supreme Court by Justice Amy Coney Barrett. So this picture, this photo here is from earlier in 2020. It's slightly different because Justice Ginsburg is no longer on the U.S. Supreme Court, and Justice Barrett is. But the U.S. Supreme Court is 9 justices, 9 judges called justices. Underneath the U.S. Supreme Court are what are called courts of appeal. And on this map on the right, the bottom right, you can see the different courts of appeal. There are 11 appeals courts plus the D.C. and the federal courts of appeal. We in Colorado are in the 10th Circuit. Okay, if you ever hear people say circuit courts of appeal, these are the districts that they're talking about. Okay, that's broken up across the United States into different districts. And then within each district, there are what are called federal district courts. For example, Colorado just has 1 district. Okay, you'll notice there are no lines within the state of Colorado on this map. Other states, for example, Iowa has this line splitting it in half. There's a northern district of Iowa and a southern district of Iowa. And the district courts are the courts where trials are held. So that's the first step in the federal court system, is to go to a district court and conduct a trial where people try to find the facts of the case, try to figure out the truth of what happened in the case, and then they make a decision. And then if one party feels like the judge made a mistake, they'll appeal it to the Circuit Court of Appeal, the 8th Circuit, for example, if you're in Iowa. And then if it gets appealed again, the United States Supreme Court would be the next on the list. We'll go over that again in our next slide. Just as an anecdote, the picture in the top right is the judge that I worked for when I was a law student. Her name is Judge Reed. She was the chief judge of the Northern District of Iowa. If you ever want to know anything more about the federal court system and what it's like to work for a judge, please let me know. I love talking about it. I love answering questions. So if you want to know any more information about that, let me know. I'd be happy to talk about it with you. So what do the federal courts do? Basically, in a nutshell, they settle disputes. Okay, that's one of their primary jobs, settle disputes. And then the second one is interpret laws. Okay, so if something happens, interpret laws. Okay, if something happens, for example, a federal crime, if somebody is selling illegal drugs, for example, that's against federal law. And so you'd go to the trial court, okay, down here in the district court level. Depending on where you live, that would determine which district you're in. Okay, and then the judge would hold a trial to settle that dispute. and interpret the law. If the law says you cannot sell this drug, then the judge would interpret that and see if that law applies to what that person was doing. Okay, so if Bob up here is doing something wrong and he's accused of committing a crime, the judge would settle the dispute and interpret the law. Now, the federal courts have jurisdiction. Okay, jurisdiction basically means the authority, the power to rule. Federal courts only have jurisdiction on certain topics. They can only hear cases or settle disputes about federal law. Okay, so if it's a state law, federal courts can't hear that. Federal courts also settle disputes between states. So if one state sues another state, they can settle that dispute. And then if there's a citizen from one state suing a citizen from another state, so if somebody living in Colorado who's a citizen of Colorado sues somebody living in Iowa, then a federal court can hear that. That's called diversity jurisdiction. So just remember the term jurisdiction. Okay, jurisdiction means the power, the authority under our government system to rule. Okay, and then what the judge says, if they have jurisdiction over your case, goes. Now, one other important note here on this slide: the job of the judges of the judicial branch to interpret the laws, that is called judicial review. Judicial review. And what that means is judges, federal judges, review laws that are passed by Congress and signed by the president to see if they are constitutional or unconstitutional. And if a judge decides that a law passed by Congress and the president is unconstitutional, they can strike that law down. They can invalidate it and cancel that law out. Okay, so judicial review is an important term to know. Okay, real quick, to go over the steps of the court system one more time. So the first step is down here at the the district court level. Okay, so step number 1, district court level. If one of the parties to that case thinks there's been a mistake, they will appeal it up to the Court of Appeal for their district. And then if they still think a mistake has been made, they'll appeal it up to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court hears a very small percentage of total cases. There's thousands and thousands of cases that get filed down here in step 1. Some of those get up to step 2, and a very, very small percent of those cases make it all the way up to step 3. But that's the step system of the judicial branch, and that is what federal courts do. Okay, the most important things to remember from this slide is that courts settle disputes and interpret the laws, which is called judicial review. Okay, how do you become a federal judge or a Supreme Court justice? We've talked about the qualifications, the requirements that you have to meet to be a senator, a representative, or the president. To become a judge, there are no qualifications. Okay, you don't even technically have to have gone to law school. There have been, surprisingly, a couple of Supreme Court justices, one who never graduated college at all, and a couple, I think 2, who never got a law degree, an official law degree. You don't have to have any qualifications. What you do have to have is the president nominate you to become a judge. So the president nominates somebody to become a new judge, okay, to fill an open seat in the judicial branch. And then, according to Article 3 of the Constitution, so the president nominates, and then according to Article 3 of the Constitution, the Senate, okay, so that one branch of Congress, one part of Congress, the Senate must provide its advice and consent to the nomination. Okay, so whoever the president nominates, the Senate must vote to approve. So the Senate votes to approve, also called confirm. Okay, so the Senate debates and questions a nominated judge, and then determines by vote if they should confirm that person, approve them to become a new judge. So, for example, here we have a picture in the bottom right of Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman to ever serve on the U.S. Supreme Court, was nominated by President Reagan, I believe, in the 80s. That's a picture of her being sworn in to testify. Okay, so senators would ask her questions about what she thinks, about what type of judge she is, about her moral character, stuff like that. And then here's Neil Gorsuch the Supreme Court justice from Colorado, going through the same process. These senators here are asking a bunch of questions of these people, these nominated judges, so that they can vote to approve or disapprove of them. So, key point number one, the judicial branch of government is made up of the U.S. Supreme Court with 9 justices and the lower federal courts, including the district courts and the courts of appeal. The main job of the judicial branch is to interpret the law and settle disputes where they have jurisdiction. Another important thing to note is that federal judges serve for life. Okay, they serve for their entire lives, unless and until they retire or are impeached. It's very, very rare that a judge gets impeached. So usually they retire or they pass away while they're still a judge. The purpose of that, the purpose of allowing judges to serve for their entire life, is to allow independent judgment. Okay, so the judges can be free to say what they actually think of the law, okay, and actually apply the law instead of just doing whatever the president or whatever Congress wants you to do. Because if you could be fired automatically when a new president comes into office, the judge might just rule based on what they think the president wants them to say. Okay, so they serve for life to sort of preserve their independence and their ability to make a fair ruling. Okay, that's sort of a way that the judicial branch checks and balances out the power of the president and Congress. Speaking of balancing out and checking, okay, so here we have on the right side, if we have the judicial branch over here, judicial branch, we would have the executive branch. The way the executive branch checks and balances out the power of the judicial branch is by appointing. Okay, the president appoints, nominates the judge, so the president actually gets to choose who the next judges are, appoints judges. Okay, and then the legislative branch, Congress, checks and balances out the power of the judicial branch. One, by confirming, okay, they vote to confirm or deny nominated judges, so confirm nominations. They have the final say whether that judge that the president chose should actually become a judge or not. And then secondly, they also have the power technically to organize the lower courts. Okay, the Constitution only directly authorizes the U.S. Supreme Court, and then it says Congress may by law basically set up organizations for lower federal courts, like the courts of appeal and district courts. Technically, also, the legislative branch here has the power to impeach and get rid of a judge if they do something really, really bad. That's so rare that I'm not even going to write it up there, but technically it's another power that the legislative branch has to check and balance out the judicial branch if it's doing something really, really egregious and wrong. Now, this last slide you do not have to remember, but it is very interesting and I think very cool. Justice Byron Whizzer White was a U.S. Supreme Court justice. He was nominated by John F. Kennedy in 1962 and confirmed to be a United States Supreme Court justice. He served all the way up until 1993. He's a super fascinating character, fascinating person. He's from Wellington, Colorado. He's from our school, our town. His picture is actually up in our hallways. If you ever find it, let me know. But it's really cool. Byron Whizzer White, a Supreme Court justice from Wellington, Colorado, went to Wellington High School when it was a high school way back in the day. He played football at CU, the University of Colorado. He finished second place in the Heisman Trophy voting in 1937. He was a running back for the CU Buffs. He then got drafted to the NFL by the Detroit Lions and to the MLB by the Pittsburgh Pirates. He chose to play in the NFL for just a year or two with the Detroit Lions. He served in World War II, and then when he came back from World War II, he finished getting his law degree and entered the legal profession, and eventually made it all the way to the very top. The U.S. Supreme Court is the highest you can go in the legal profession. So you don't have to remember that. It's just a cool story that we have a connection to this guy who was one of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court for about 30 years, from 62 to 93. All right, key point number 1, again, the judicial branch of government is made up of the U.S. Supreme Court with 9 justices and the lower federal courts, including the courts of appeal and the district courts. The main job of the judicial branch is to interpret the law and settle disputes. Federal judges serve for life until they retire or pass away. Okay. Key point number 2, the judicial branch is checked and balanced out by the executive branch. Okay, the executive branch balances them out because the president appoints, they choose new judges. And then the legislative branch balances out the judicial branch's power because the Senate votes to confirm a new judge or reject a new judge. And this Congress can also organize how the court system is structured. All right, what's next? There is no Nearpod again in this lesson. So after you finish this, play pause it, play through at least one case in Argument Wars. Okay, it's a game that's linked in Google Classroom. Pick which case you want, then argue it before the Supreme Court. It's a very realistic and very cool game. If you want to get sort of a similar experience to what actually arguing in front of a bench of judges would be like. So play through at least one case in Argument Wars and then review the lesson questions so you are ready for the mastery check.